Everybody, that's really not a great angle at all. So all of the, we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna move this back a bit, I think, until we can get everybody in there. Very cool. We're in Copenhagen. Very cool, that'll work. Here we go. Yeah, the internet loves vertical, but because otherwise everybody on the screen is gonna be going back and twisting their camera. So. All right, here we go. So thank you everybody in Copenhagen for coming to the TV Hub. This is super cool. So I just want to introduce myself real quickly here. I'm Jesse. I'm assuming everybody here knows that Jesse Steehouse. I'm a tea guy. I lived in China for many years, 9 years exactly, and did Chinese comedy. Tea was my hobby. COVID hit. I found I couldn't do comedy from my parents' kitchen, and I was trying to figure out ways of continuing to do the cultural exchange, which I had done all this time between the West and China doing comedy. I kind of found another way for that was my love of tea, and the fact that I had contacts with all these great tea farmers turned out to be something that people were really interested in, and eventually it's turned into like an online tea community now, which is bringing people together even today in the University of Copenhagen. And today we're hosted by the Beverage Forum. If you guys could take the mic and introduce yourselves. Who are you?
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for taking the time to talk about tea with us. Yeah, and also enjoy tea. Well, I'm Oscar. I used to be part of the Beverage Forum at the University of Copenhagen. Now I'm not anymore, but I thought it would still be fun to kind of pass the torch in a fun and exciting way. We host different social gatherings here at the university and with different companies in the Copenhagen area, mostly related to beverage or fermented foods and stuff like that. So coffee, tea, beer, wine, you name it, we've probably been there and done it.
I like how open you guys are. You're any beverage.
Any beverage.
Every beverage.
If it's fermented, it's great. If it's not, it's also great.
What if it was liquid but then it froze? Is that a beverage or a snack? Popsicle? Is it popsicle a beverage?
Yes.
Yes. So we got one yes and everybody else didn't know. It's a very philosophical question. So thank you so much. And who else do we have here?
Yeah, I'm Johan. I'm also part of Beverage Forum. I studied at the second year at the University of Copenhagen, and I joined the forum because I just really like beverages, like everybody else in here. And also tea. I enjoy to drink tea a lot. So
very cool.
Today.
Awesome, very cool. So if at the end of the meeting, if you want to get everybody's email or something like that, so you can tell them about future events or something like that, I think it'd be a lot of fun. Is it only for students or is it for open for the outside world?
I mean, it is mostly for students at the University of Copenhagen, but we're trying to expand in a way so we can have more people and enjoy more interesting things. But right now, since we're a non-profit organization, we're doing it only for students because it allows us to make deals with the companies that we're working with.
That makes sense. Very cool. Well, it's great to be able to be hosted here, and then for the people online, you may actually not be able to see, but why don't you go tilt the camera around and show them where we are, and just how we have a whole lecture hall full of people drinking tea. This is pretty amazing. When I was planning this European trip, I really wanted to be able to tell people about the new warehouse we're opening and meet the European tea community, because as much as I've done tea a long time, I started kind of the online tea house and all of the videos during COVID at a time when I couldn't leave the house. And so it was by the time the vaccines were out and the world had opened up, I found out that I had this tea community that I had been building, and they were all over the world because it was all social. And it's always been part of my thinking to try to actually meet some of the people who watch the videos and drink the tea and be able to have tea with you guys. So, and I'm really amazed at how many people showed up. So this is great. So we're drinking the 2008 Sister Eyes white tea for the first tea of the day, and take a smell of that. Yeah. So the aged white teas are really fun, and this one in particular is kind of very fruity. First steep, which you could wash, but I think it's always fun when you're trying a new tea for the first time to try try this as well. You can have it over here. Take a sip over there, and make sure to have the mic if you want to say anything. I guess if you guys, cheers everybody, have we been able to start making some of the tea in there? I think people are getting their tea slowly. How is the pot system working out? We've distributed several teapots amongst the audience with tea in them, and they're making their own tea. Very cool. Is there any tea there? I guess this center pot would be for you. Or see if we can distribute from here. For the other teas, we can be a little bit more free with them. The 2008, I can't run out of the cake before I leave Europe, or else it will be a shame. But yeah, so here we go. Cheers to everybody. Cheers. Skål. Skål. Is that it? Skål. Do you guys do like the clap as well, or is it only the Icelanders? I remember watching in the World Cup, like the Iceland, they had like a giant clap all the audience was doing. I don't know if that's all Nordic. Not
We just say skål.
I heard skål, yeah. Skål is classic. There we go. So, very cool. So yeah, if I guess we'll start with you guys. If you have any tea questions that you wanted to ask or talk about, we can have a little discussion here. What kind of, for you as a beverage, makes tea interesting? Like what's gotten you guys into tea as beverage people?
I used to brew a lot of coffee, and then I went more into tea because I think it's easier to keep fresh. And you can just have it around in your home, and it'll stay fresh for a long time. Where coffee will only stay fresh for like 2 weeks. Yeah, so that's kind of why I started drinking a lot of tea.
Or
I
even
saw your videos
also. Yeah, it's great. So how did you find the videos originally? They just came up on the social media?
No, I think I saw it online for tea, and then there was also a website called Tea for Me, Please. I think. And then I dived into read about the stuff, and then I also then your video started to power up. So.
Yeah. No, it's I think like when I first went to the tea market in China, which would have been in like 2010, I had this experience where I was like, oh, this is really good. It's way better than any tea that I'd had in America. And I was like, people need to know about this. But at the time, like there wasn't TikTok, there wasn't YouTube, like there weren't podcasts, like they were there, but it wasn't anywhere near the way it is now. And so it immediately hit me. It was like, well, without some way to actually reach people and do essentially education, because like part of the reason the tea is better is because you need to know where it's coming from and get the good quality and how do you make it and how do you steep it. And because that sort of information is like hard to get across to people, I kind of was like, well, even if I had really good tea, it wouldn't matter because I couldn't get in touch with people. But like the internet really solved a lot of those problems in a way that even 10 years ago, really, it was not easy. So that's great to hear. What about you?
I think for me it was mostly, I mean, all my life beverages have been very interesting. For me, tea was mostly just tea bags, just sparkling the water. Then I went on a trip to China in 2018
Oh, nice.
with some friends.
Where'd you go?
I went to Beijing, Shanghai, and anywhere else? I don't remember. It's been a long time.
It's been a while.
Yeah. And we experienced a lot of different tea ceremonies and another great stuff over there, and kind of opened my eyes to tea. And then I've been really into coffee these last 5 or 6 years. And I'm trying to segue slowly but steadily more into tea, also kind of more out my life.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I feel like everybody has kind of their own way into finding the tea. What do you guys think of this 2008, the Sister Eyes White Tea? It starts out a little bit lighter and fruitier, and as you see, it's going to kind of get darker as we go through more steeps. I'm going to re-punch up the water. Yeah. So, what do you guys think of this one?
I think it's a good tea.
Yeah.
But usually I'm more into green tea. I think white tea it doesn't taste like much. So for me, a green tea
It'll be good. I brought a green tea with me on this trip, but I don't think I have it here on the table. But another time I'll bring some green teas. We have 4 spring greens, I believe, on the website right now. We have a Longjing, a Guoganshan green tea, a white Anji green tea, which in Chinese is just called Anji white tea, but it's actually green tea, even though it's called white tea, so it's very confusing. And then we have an ancient tree green tea, Hongyao ancient tree green tea, which is unusual because they don't usually make green tea out of ancient leaves, because a lot of the ancient tree teas like this, what it means is that these are trees that are really, really old. Ancient tree, there's no like scientific definition of it, but usually at least 100 years, 200 is safe for it to be considered an ancient tree. And they taste different. They have different energy to them. They are generally, they're 100% guaranteed to be pesticide free, because you would get thrown in jail for spraying pesticide on an ancient tea tree because they're so valuable. And especially the wild ones, which these are as well. These are like way up in the mountains in these areas that they've been like over the last 2,000 years, people have been drinking tea. Like the locals have known and mapped out to the tree every wild tea tree they know of. And they've been all throughout those mountains. So there's only so much of it, and you can get it like, if you can get it direct from those areas, it's like some of the best tea you can get kind of in the whole world. And so, but the challenge is because of that, green tea, which generally as you store it, it gets less good. They generally don't make green tea out of the ancient tree teas, because if you're going to have these very valuable resource trees, you usually don't make green tea out of it. You might as well make something like a white tea or a pu'er that's going to get better as it ages rather than not as good. So I put it on the site because it was the only time I'd ever tried it, and it was quite good. But as this white tea goes further, though, it'll get some more flavor to it, and so I think you'll enjoy that kind of herbal flavor going forward. Yeah.
I saw you go to the video earlier today about red tea, you also mentioned. But what actually is red tea?
Sure. Well, this is a good way to kind of get into what is tea. So tea is, and I should say, I learned tea in the Chinese tea tradition by living in China. So if you ask anybody, like if you go to America, like what is tea? Anything that's steeped in water, they kind of call tea. But tea, as far as the Chinese tradition goes, is they have what they call the liu da cha lei, the 6 main types of tea. And those are red, green, white, oolong, yellow, and black. So the red, though, is what the Chinese call red tea, in the West we call black tea. So if you see like a black tea or an Earl Grey or something like that, the Chinese would call the tea base red tea. And then the black tea, what they call black tea in English technically is called dark tea. And I don't even use that word because no one knows about dark tea. And if I say dark tea, no one knows what I'm talking about. So it does get a little bit confusing because the different tea types, there are different countries have different terminology. What happened was that the British, when they were getting the tea over, they named the tea after the color of the leaf, and the Chinese named the tea generally after the color of the liquid. So the red tea liquid or the black tea liquid kind of looks red. And similarly, if you make like a dark show pu'er, then that looks black. So that is kind of how it goes. So the red tea, what they do is they pick the leaves, and then all of the tea processing has to be done very quickly because tea it's a plant. So part of the challenge of having good tea is that you don't just have to have good tea that comes in these places that are very far away. You also need to be able to pick it and transport it to the place you're going to process it quickly. So you go and pick the leaves from the trees. Generally they have like baskets. The tea pickers will put the tea into little baskets. They'll go and get those smaller baskets into big baskets, and they'll bring the big baskets back to a processing area. And the difference between all those 6 types of tea, it all depends on now what happens from this moment on. So if you start processing the tea leaf as a red tea, you can do it as a red tea, you can do it as a green tea, you can do it as a white tea. It depends on what you do with the leaf once you've picked it. And the leaf is all Camellia sinensis, it's one plant. So all of those 6 different types of teas, all of the true teas as they would be known in China, they all come from one plant. So sometimes people ask like, oh, do you have any mint teas or chamomile teas? And those are actually out of people may drink those in China, but they're kind of not part of the tradition of the gongfu tea and doing it that way. So you can see here, very nice clear tea color, a little bit darker, going into these more.
Yeah, development in the color as well.
Yeah. So to answer your question about red tea, yeah, what do you think of this one? Well, before we get in, it's good.
Sweeter.
Yeah.
A little earthy.
Yeah, little earthy herbal.
Definitely has some earthiness to it. I feel like it has a little bit of barkiness as well.
Yeah, some barky flavors. The white tea really has a clean progression where it'll start off like sweeter and more floral, get kind of deeper, and it'll depend on what type of white tea you have too. But generally, that progression is like you get to kind of experience that with the white tea in a way that sometimes green tea is a little bit like flatter. Not that that's bad, but it's like the white tea will change in character quite a bit from the beginning to the middle to the end. So for the red tea, to make red tea, which in the West is known as black tea, what they do is they pick the leaves and then they first they wither them, so they allow them to basically air out and dry. They have these long trays where they'll be running fans underneath the tray to try to move air to try to be able to dry the leaf. And all of the different processing technique essentially is trying to control how and when you take water out of the leaf. Because it's like if you have a salad and you leave the salad leaf out for like a day, it's going to wilt, it's going to go bad. But tea can be stored, like the tea we're drinking now is stored from 2008. And in order to do that, you need to get the water out. But how you do that and how quickly and what ways alters the flavor of the tea. And also if you do it wrong, you can burn the tea or have like bad flavors in there that are not fun. So, if you wither the tea and you just wither it and dry it, and you don't do anything else, you have white tea. So that's what the white tea is, kind of the most minimally processed tea. We have a question from the audience as well. Give them the give them the mic. Yeah.
So
Yep.
I was just wondering, so withering is for the white tea.
Mhm.
So if they're too slow, they will always end up with the white tea. If they go for one, but they're too slow, they'll change it to
I think I've never heard of that happening because they're really good. Like they're really good at doing what they're doing, and like the tea season is very compressed because the moment you need to wait for the first rain of the year for the leaves to come out. So everybody who like is a professional tea farmer or like tea makers, they're all like ready to go the moment it happens. They have everything ready. Sometimes it comes early. Increasingly now with climate change, it comes later. Or not at all, which is a problem. Climate change is like a huge aspect of in the tea industry right now, and there's a lot of people in China researching the new rain patterns and what it means to different tea areas. But basically, they're ready for it when it comes, and when it comes, they have all this equipment to be able to do the different parts of the processing, and they're going to go through it one way or the other. Even if they process it badly, they're going to go through it because there's a couple of reasons for it. One, a lot of this tea, especially the good tea, has already kind of been bought before it was made. So people like, potentially like me, but like in China, there's lots of people that will go in advance to the farmers and say, I want your pu'er. You got to deliver the pu'er. You can't be like, oh, we messed it up and so now we have white tea this year. So they're going to make it into pu'er one way or the other. The other thing is that the withering process, they wind up having a lot of labor for all of these steps. So it's actually a difficult type of labor to be able to get because you need a lot of people during the picking season, but not necessarily the rest of the year. So there's kind of an internal market within China amongst tea laborers, everybody from picking to processing to like really master level people that know exactly how long to wither it, exactly how long to knead it, exactly how long to roast it. All of the different steps that may be needed in any given tea, like they've flown those people in, or they've driven them in from wherever they live nearby, and they're like ready to go because the moment that they pick the leaf, they basically have to be processing it that night, and so they're ready to make it. So what sometimes people will do now, especially in the new market, is like if you have a mountain that's famous for pu'er tea, maybe to kind of spice things up, they'll make a white tea out of it. And this is also an opportunity, like we have this Laobanjiang white tea. This is an example of that sort of thing where Laobanjiang, this one, the orange. Yeah, so like this one is an example of like, Laobanjiang is one of the most expensive tea mountains out there. It's like really, really expensive if you want the old village Laobanjiang for pu'er. But so many people want Laobanjiang that the whole region around Laobanjiang has started growing tea. And because certain types of, like, for instance, the younger trees, which are not going to be as valuable, they can't really compete with the older trees on the market. So if they're like, why would I sell less good Laobanjiang raw pu'er when I'm going to be competing with better Laobanjiang raw pu'er? So some farmers have started to innovate by taking, for instance, a really good tea mountain and having younger trees as a white tea, which is like enough that it's kind of now a different product in the minds of the Chinese at least. In the minds of the West, nobody knows any of these mountains, and so it's frustrating because like I'll go to the mountains and they'll tell me how to advertise, and I'm like, you guys don't, like it's like all these things that seem really important to you are almost impossible to communicate, and it's not that you're wrong to try, but it's like some things are communicatable and some are not. So the result is that what you have is, but you know, for me as a tea taster, it's actually kind of liberating because I don't need to, like the Western tea market is not going to be like, this Laobanjiang raw pu'er tea tastes slightly worse than some other vendors' Laobanjiang raw pu'er tea. I can be like, is it good? Is it a good price? Do I like the taste of it? Do I like how it makes me feel? Do I think there are aspects of this that get me really excited to drink it? And if the answer is yes, like younger trees, white tea versus raw pu'er, I'm cool with that. Like, and this is one of my favorites actually. I hope we have a chance to make it at some point during the day. But anyway, for the red tea, to go back to the original question, what they will then do is they wither it, and then depending on the tea place, they may knead it, kind of roll it around, break the cell walls a bit, and then they'll put it in a giant basket and they'll leave it to, you could say ferment or oxidize. There's kind of an argument within China whether it's fermenting or oxidizing or both, but they leave it to kind of ferment for a day, and then day 2 they'll go lay it out in the and then you could either sun dry it or you could roast it. And so if you sun dry it, you come up with a type of tea that can be called shai hong, which is like sun roasted. Shai is like to be like dry, or like when the sun shines on you, it's like to be sun attacked. I don't know, sun kissed. Yeah. It's a weirdly difficult word to translate. It's like if you go out and you get like a sunburn, they'll say like, oh, shai hong, I was shied red by the sun. Or you could roast the tea. Some types like lapsang sochong are smoked with pine wood. So all of these different steps are opportunities for the local tea farmers to kind of create a unique product that's going to work, and a lot of them are based off of tradition. So an area that tends to make tea one way tends to have all the producers make all that tea one way. And they kind of get famous in China based off of the region and the style that kind of go together. The type of plant that grows well in this type of the country is good for this type of tea and this type of process. And this has all been figured out over the last 2,000 years. And so that's why you tend to have certain types of tea produced in certain areas and not in others. And why, for instance, I was interested to see, oh, these people are doing ancient tea, green tea, that's weird. That's because that's not something that would normally be happening with that. And if you drink a lot of tea, eventually you kind of find those weird things. Some of them are good, some of them are not. And so it's part of my, I guess it's a job, but like what I was doing as a tea guy, just a hobbyist, was like trying to get into all these details, and it really adds a lot to the tea experience, because that way when you're drinking it, you can be like, oh, like them sun drying it really helped create this really light fruity flavor, but then these other people from a nearby mountain that did like more of like a electric roast, it's darker and like, you know, maltier or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it really can depend, you know.
I think now that we're also talking about production, we can really skip talking about flavor as well.
Yeah.
Could you maybe give an insight in what to look for when most of the students here, I don't think they're insanely educated in tea.
Yeah.
So any off flavors that you could maybe highlight, or anything you should be aware of when you buy tea?
Sure, that's a good question. So I think the first thing, like personally, I think that like when you're doing tea, don't be like intimidated by being, oh, I can't, like there's flavors in there that I know I'm not tasting. Oh, like this is a bad attitude to have when drinking tea. Tea did not evolve to be the super high-minded thing, like out of nowhere. And if you go to a lot of the tea mountains, a lot of the tea farmers even will just throw the tea in a cup of boiling water and they just drink it with the leaves floating in there and they're like, it tastes good. And then you ask them like, what flavor notes are you getting? And they're like, what are you talking about? It tastes good, it's sweet, it's clean. So I think for tea, generally what I look for in teas is you want to have, I almost think of it as like a little bit like music. If you have like good speakers, they can do low notes, medium notes, and high notes. And so like, if you have a tea that's like all low note and nothing else, that's kind of not so good. And a lot of like, if you have like a Lipton, or I don't know if I'm allowed to bash other brands, I'm not sure. Okay. Whatever, if you have a lot of tea bags, or for instance, I had tea on the plane the other day because it was the only thing that they had. And like, I was tasting this and I was like, the low notes are actually okay, but it doesn't really have a lot of these middle or high notes. And so I really like looking for tea that has a little bit of everything in there. It's gonna have some like deeper flavor in there, but also it's gonna taste good on the mouth, and also it's gonna have some fragrance. What those notes are really depends on the tea. So this white tea is gonna be very different from a pu'er, very different from a green tea. But like in general, I'm looking for a tea that kind of has stuff going on, and then I also personally like it to be kind of balanced. So like sometimes you'll have a tea where there's like, for instance, like raw pu'er has this like astringent dry mouth flavor to it. You could call it bitterness, but it's not super bitter. It's kind of a dry mouth, like there's an element to that bitterness to it. And balanced with the rest of the flavors of the sweetness and the fruitiness and whatever, that can be really tasty. But if it's overwhelming, it's like, no, it's just, this isn't good. I don't like it. So the balance is the thing to look for, yeah.
If you're new to tea, how do you know that you brewed the tea right? I think that's a question I had for myself when I started doing tea.
Yeah.
I don't know if my water is the right temperature and what temperature should it be for this different varieties of tea.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say one easy way of doing this better is to have good quality tea. So if you have good quality tea, you can make it at many different steep times and temperatures, and it'll kind of have a different personality of each of them, but it's not going to be bad. Like this, right now, we're steeping it at 100 and I'm boiling the water again. If we have anybody who wants to ask questions, we can open it up maybe in the audience. But if I were to steep this with 60-degree water, it'll be lighter, but it still should be pretty good. But if you have part of the challenge of making like a tea bag well, for instance, is that the tea bag is all ground up into powder, so it steeps instantly, and all the sort of like bitter flavor, the good flavors and the bitter flavors all come out at once. But it's also not particularly a lot of tea or good tea, so you have to steep it a long time in order to get flavor out of it. But the longer it's in there, the more bitter it's getting. So you really need to be a real expert to make a tea bag well, which is kind of ironic. But if you have good tea, it's going to taste good in many different ways. So I'm of the mentality that like, you never want to like, think like, oh, I'm going to mess it up to be in your head when you're making tea, because it's like, we're here to have tea. Like, you know, no one's grading you, no one's judging you, there are no tea police. No one's going to like come to your house and slap you if you did it wrong. And I think that that doesn't mean, however, you can't learn about different types of tea. So, for instance, white tea, this aged white tea, you can steep at 100 because it's aged, it's oxidized, it's not going to be like burned. But if I had this year's white tea, like fresh white tea from this year's harvest, only a couple months old, I would steep that at 80, and try that first and see how it works. And then every tea is a little bit different. Maybe one mountain, the white tea, I'm like, I only want to do 70. Another mountain, it's like, you know, this works at 100, even though it's young. And you kind of learn by making the tea again and again. And that's one of the good things about, say, getting a cake of tea or like a bag of tea is like your first time through, you're really experimenting. And I give steep time and temperature, but it's mostly as a guideline to start. And then ultimately it's about your taste. Like some people really like that, whatever, that bitter flavor, and so they'll want to buy a really astringent pu'ers and just blast them. But generally it's a matter of balancing. So if you have a tea that is like too much at boiling, you can either back off the temperature or you can back off the steep time, or you can do both. And that's part of the reason why this style is called Gongfu tea. Gongfu means Kung Fu. But Kung Fu literally is better, it's not just Kung Fu, it literally translates to skill. So it's like skill tea. My way that I make this tea is unique to me. We have people in the audience making tea, it's going to taste a little different to them. And so being able to make the tea skillfully will be kind of your calling card, and like, why have tea with me versus having tea made by like a machine in an airport? Like, there's going to be more skill coming from the human and from my having made this tea specifically many times and having made white tea many, many times. So yeah, so that's definitely up there. Question from the audience?
Yes. So going back to the taste, does the water play a crucial role as far as it's safe to consume in terms of tea?
Yeah, so the question is, does the water play a role in whether the tea is like safe to consume?
No, it's rather, does it play a role in the taste?
Oh, in the taste, yeah. So the water can play a role in the taste for sure. Again, in the mentality of like, don't let small things stop you from enjoying your tea time. Wherever you live, that's where the water is. You know, that being said, tea that has absolutely no mineral content, like reverse osmosis water or something like that, will oftentimes taste a little bit flat because there's nothing in there at all for the flavored things to bind to. But if your tea is too minerally or hard, then you also will lose some of the subtle flavors of the tea and it'll kind of flatten everything out. So I was in Rome last week and I made tea with water from the fountains they had out in the public. They have these like fountains all throughout the city. And I thought it'd be fun to make tea with that water. And so it was good, but it was definitely, the water was kind of hard. It had like more calcium, like, you know, it's just kind of harder water. And that it's not ideal for making a tea. I'm looking into whether I can get it because it's kind of ridiculous to ship water, but like it's kind of cool. This last time I was back in China, there's a like one of the water brands, which is like a major water brand in China. They have a new special line of tea drinking water from Wuyi Mountain. So they take the actual Wuyi Mountain water and they bottle it, and then they ship it specifically for tea drinking. And you can get a bottle of it, like, you know, a jug of it or a pack of 4 jugs. And it was something like 5 times more than normal water, but like water in China is very cheap. So it's like if I lived in China, I'd be drinking just Wuyi Mountain water, because why not? But I think also the water for me, a big part of it is also the story of that tea time. So like, I could have had Wuyi Mountain water, and I don't think it would have made my tea time better than drinking the water in Rome from the fountain in Rome. You know, I'm in Rome. Like, why ship water halfway around the world? Is that really making my tea time better? I actually think it might be better to have the flavor be a little bit muted, but really have this experience. And so the thing about the tea time is it's about all of it. It's about the tea, it's about the people. It's about like the mentality and the space that you put yourself in with the tea. That's really what makes it more than just a beverage, and why it's like, you know, why 30, 40 people showed up in this room, as opposed to, you know, finding a way to just like down the tea and drink it. And this is something that I think, like, you asked earlier about having a scale, or people are like, what if I have a timer? If it makes the experience better for you, and makes the tea time more the way you want to do it and shows your skill, I think you should go for it. In China, nobody that I know uses a timer. I've seen some people use scales, but like nobody uses a timer. It's all kind of based off of the feel. And then for water, they tend to use kind of like, you know how office buildings, they'll have like water delivery service with like filtered water in like big jugs. They generally will use something like that for the water. And then I also have that in my house. Like in LA, I have an apartment and I'm just in an apartment building, but I have like a office water delivery service. And they're like, who's running an office out of this apartment building? But that's not the weirdest thing happening in downtown LA. So no one's ever said anything about it. So great question. We have other questions over here. We can pass the thing around. What do you guys think of this tea? Good? Nice, excellent. Hopefully it's
Water is quite
yeah.
hard.
Yeah, the water's a little bit hard, but
In Copenhagen.
oh yeah, sorry, in Copenhagen? Yeah. I looked into it. I'm trying to figure out if I can ship that Wee Mountain water around. I actually was like gonna try to get in touch with the company that makes it and be like, as a promotional gig, you should like give me 100 gallons of this water and ship it yourself, and like you do the importing. But it like, yeah, a lot of this stuff, it's like really kind of unfortunate, but the paperwork is the biggest thing holding back all this stuff. Because the moment you drink it, you realize the tea quality is really good. But like the paperwork, and so this is my new foray into European paperwork. I'm learning a lot.
Welcome to the union.
Exactly, and then the union, and then every country within the union, and but I mean overall, I think that you know I'm hopeful that we'll get through it. And this is again for our new warehouse that's opening up. Where as soon as I have the stuff on the train or the boat heading over, I'll be able to tell everybody. And you know, but we're in it for the long haul. Like you know, I really believe that like kind of like in America, how people love coffee. But 20 years ago or 15 years ago even, they were drinking powdered coffee, you know, just middle of the morning, you know, drink the powdered coffee. And now people have really noticed like, hey, if I spend a little bit of time on the ingredients, if I spend a little bit of time on how to make it, you don't need to be like full third wave coffee, gooseneck kettle, timer, like just realizing that having full beans and grinding them at home is better than having powder in like a little sachet. Similarly, I think eventually the tea world outside of Asia is going to realize that the tea bag with ground up, ultra homogeneous, no identity at all to it, black tea, is not really great tea. And so I think that the West, my impression has been the tea culture is more evolved than the quality of the tea being used in that culture. And so that's kind of what makes me hopeful about being here in Europe and, you know, 30-something people showing up in Denmark to drink tea, which is really cool. So we have a question over here. Yes.
So regarding water again,
Yes.
Have you had any experience using things like reverse osmosis or other kind of filtered waters like that, or is it just not very interesting?
So I actually got a reverse osmosis machine for my apartment, and I did like a sampling of different types of water, and the result was I had reverse osmosis, filtered, and tap water, and both the filtered and the reverse osmosis were clearly superior to the tap water. Between the two of them, in theory, you could have like preference of taste between whether filtered or reverse osmosis was better. But the one thing that was immediately clear was that if you have a lighter, more like, if you have a lighter, like kind of more fragrant tea, like a green tea, as opposed to like a very dark pu'er, the water quality was much more apparent. So any better water with a lighter tea is more important, I think. And then I personally felt like the reverse osmosis was not quite as good as the filtered water for that reason I was saying. It's like there's nothing in there, so it like, I'm not a scientist, but I think there's like chemically the flavors in the tea need something to bind to in order to get into your body and to get leached out of the tea leaf. And so I think that the filtered water has like there's like a little bit of minerals in there. But to some degree, it's also a matter of taste. I would say that if I had tap water and reverse osmosis water, I'd be drinking the reverse osmosis water, probably. But like, I don't know, you try both and see which is better. Ultimately, like all this is up to your own taste. Like nothing's like you drink it, you think it's bad, other people tell you it's good, or vice versa. It's like, we're doing this for our own taste, and like, you know, not everybody's taste is like super expensive tea with fancy water. Like, you know, I have a lot, and also your taste can be different on different days for different reasons, and you know, a lot of people, you know, go through a period where like, I drink raw pu'er every day for 5 years, and then you kind of, one day you're like, I don't want to drink that anymore, or something else. So like, taste changes, and it's, you know, it's valuable, so yeah. Yes, a question over here, do we have the mic over there? Oh, you guys are so good.
It's not really a question, it's more a compliment.
Oh, yeah?
So
I like this, yeah.
I studied China studies here in Copenhagen
nice.
for 7 years.
Nice.
And I've been to China multiple times, and I just think what you're doing with like the whole explaining a different culture through the tea time is really, really great.
Thank you.
Breaking down barriers and opening China up to more people. So yeah, I
Thank
really,
you so much.
I really
How do you like the Chinese studies programs here?
I think it's really, really good. Yeah, we both learn the language and culture, politics, everything, and you can also shape it however you want. So yeah, I'm doing it the culture way. And, yeah, so I think what you're doing is really, really great.
Thank you so much. I
And
appreciate it.
I've been drinking out of it, but I wanted to gift you my teacups.
Oh, thank you so much.
So yeah, I got these from a lady in Beijing that I drank tea with, and she was like, I will gift you these, and we.
Oh, super nice.
Yeah,
So
so
I'll take one of them,
Yeah,
and then you can
of
keep the other.
But I
that's
have
really-
another one at home, but my friend can drink out of it.
That's great. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
okay.
I really appreciate it. That's really
Yeah,
great.
if
Well,
everybody enjoys tea time, I have to
there we go.
go now.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, keep up with the studies, and if you guys ever want to do like a departmental program next time I come back, we could actually, you know, we have a lecture hall and everything like that. We could have actually done like some sort of studies program with that. So, thank you so much. What was your name?
Esther?
Astrid. Nice to
Yeah,
meet you.
my
Okay, why?
friend wrote a message.
Awesome. Oh, okay, very good. All right, this is Astrid. Very cool. Awesome, thank you. Appreciate it. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is like, it's really weird that it's all tied together in my mind, because the thing about how I started the whole tea thing on the internet was that I was, as I said, I'd spent 9 years doing Chinese comedy. And the fun thing about doing the comedy was it was this great tool to be able to connect the cultures, because like everything from China, I expect it's the same here in Europe, but in America, you say China, the second sentence almost has to be political. It's like, no one's making any money unless we're either like pro-China or anti-China. And like the idea of China as a place where like real people live and like are just going about their day and have hobbies and like, you know, do stuff. For whatever reason, like in the entire like Western kind of ecosystem, it's hard to get that storyline through. And it's like, it's really weird because it's like, you know, I think like in America, like you know, America is a big economy, but like, imagine, I was telling people in America, it's like imagine if the only thing that ever is mentioned about America is the economy or the election. And it's like, there's nothing else you can get people to talk about. Like there was, yeah.
In Europe right now.
Yeah, is it kind of like that? It's the thing, but like it's not just, but like there's something that like the media has failed, I think, what kind of I learned is people-to-people communication. So my initial start as my career, like my first job, when I graduated, I got a Fulbright fellowship to research Chinese comedy. That's how I got into the Chinese comedy. And the Fulbright program is the U.S. government, the State Department's academic exchange program. So they send American scholars to other countries to research their culture, and they take scholars from other countries into America to research American culture. And it's like an exchange program, but it's a people-to-people exchange program. It's not government to government. It's like people to people. And that perspective has been so much more valuable to me in my life of not only just living a good life where I get to drink good tea and meet good people and like enjoy myself, but it's also, I think, a more productive way of looking at a lot of the areas that seem really conflict-laden in society. Like, how do we get through? Well, the answer is you're fighting up here about systems and, you know, communism and capitalism. It's like, dude, they've been fighting about that for hundreds of years. We're not gonna find the solution in this short video. But what we can do on the people-to-people side, it's the opposite, like in the small things about how people actually try to live life and where those interactions between cultures take place in the real world. That's where like we kind of like find the solutions to these things. So, you know, are all aspects of Chinese culture going to be valuable to everybody in the West? Not necessarily, but I know a lot of people in America that they're living a fast life. They wake up, I need my caffeine, and coffee to them or tea or whatever it is like a tool to work. And in China, the idea that you could sit and make your tea, and it's like, take 15 minutes. Like, chill out. Like, if you can't take 15 minutes to be able to have tea, your life is kind of out of control. And like that mentality may not be useful for everybody, but I think it was definitely useful for me. And it's definitely one of the reasons why, like, ironically, when I travel, I feel a lot less centered because I don't have this process of every morning being able to wake up, have a little breakfast, have a little bit of tea. Now I feel like I'm ready to take on the day. And it's been a very useful practice to be able to have. So that sort of stuff comes from people to people. We have a question over here, yes? Do we have the mic? Let's get we'll have the question 1 and 2, yes.
So what would you say that there are differences in tastes between storage and tea, such as loose tea or tea cakes?
That's a good question. The storage of tea versus like loose leaf tea. Generally the thing you want to look at is surface area. So if you have, one of the reasons why the like loose leaf is better than say like a powder that you get in a tea bag is because, as I said, a powder has tons of surface area. It all comes out at once. And that's everything in the leaf, the good stuff, the bad stuff, it's all coming out. With the tea leaf, especially if you have the really nice whole leaves, you get the tea leaf kind of giving up its energy over a longer period of time, and that creates a tea that you can re-steep multiple times, whereas a tea bag you kind of can't. And it also means that you have, it also means that you get like more, like you're not flooded with all of, say, a bitter flavor in one like cup. So if you have a very small loose leaf tea, like tiny leaves, sometimes tea will be loose leaf, but like really, really small, that tea is going to steep very fast. And so if I were to do a wash steep of that, I would do it in like 3 seconds. Also, sometimes you have teas that are just kind of stronger than others. So like pu'er, that is strong. So like a lot of raw pu'er or yen cha, if you've ever had rock tea, that stuff steeps immediately. Like you can't steep it for a minute, it's going to go crazy on you. So like some of this you can learn from having multiple types of tea, but in general, smaller leaves and more surface area, it's going to come out quicker. Stronger leaves, going to come out quicker. So if you have it pressed in a cake, sometimes if it's a really tight cake, you're really only getting water outside of the outside edge of it, and so you would want to be able to give it a longer steep. So like I have like homemade white tea balls on my website that are like balls, and when you make those, I would give it like, it's really funny, like the first steep I might give it a minute in a wash steep, but when it's open, I might be steeping it for 10 seconds. And that's because when the leaves are open and they're like unfurled and all of the leaves are getting wet at once, it's going to steep faster. But when they're tight up and it's not really penetrated into the tea, it's going to steep slower. So even a tea cake like this, it's a little bit harder to see, but like it was basically fully unfurled by the end of the first steep because this tea cake was packed very loosely, which I personally prefer because it makes it easier to break up. But it takes a little bit more time to press them looser, and so it's more expensive generally. Also, you need to like know the tea people to give them that note, because sometimes you go to the market, they press the leaves 15 years ago or whatever, and it's that however tight it is how tight it is. So, but I would say, yeah, keep an eye for like if you have a pressed tea like in a cake, is the water actually getting in? If it is, then maybe you don't need a super long like steep. But if it's not, you can kind of give it some more time, and then as it opens, you can shorten the steep time. Another thing you can try if you have a really tightly packed tea is, let's say you do that first wash steep, and then after you've poured the first wash steep, you can put the lid back on and kind of let it steam a bit in the hot Daiwan. And even though there's no water in there, it'll kind of just be exposed to the heat and kind of loosen up a bit. And then depending on if you want to as well, you can even use like the lid and kind of give it a little bit of a agitation. But again, like it depends on your style. Like if you're in a high fancy tea house, they wouldn't be agitating the tea. If it's me at home, it's like, you know, I kind of want to get into the tea. You know, I'm not performing for anyone, so it's a good way to do it. So very cool. Let me do this. Let's have one last steep of this, and then I think we'll switch teams and we'll try something new. One last question up there, and then one, and then two. We'll finish that. We'll do a new tea, and we'll turn off the camera. So I hope you guys have been enjoying it. We haven't been talking to you, but yes, continue.
I know absolutely nothing about tea.
Ah.
I've heard that the second or third or fourth brew is often the best one,
Yeah.
and not the first. You give it out to your enemy or something like
Yeah.
saying. Why is that?
Yeah, so it's it has to do with like every different tea is a little bit different. So sometimes like for a green tea, for instance, like that first steep is going to be pretty good. But for like an aged like pu'er or whatever that's been sitting for a while, it does take a little while to open up because it's been dry for so long. The reason is because the leaf, as I said, it kind of gets wet slowly. It gives up its, in Chinese it's called the tea energy, cha qi. It gives up the tea energy over a period of time. And the heat is kind of a catalyst to that. So that's why if you steep a tea at say 60 degrees versus 100, you need to steep the 60 degree longer to get more flavor out than if you did 100. The other reason is that a lot of the Chinese teas are just frankly really good. And so they have a lot of tea energy to give. People have kind of been used to, it's like if you only ate highly processed grocery store bread your whole life and then you go to a real bakery. It's like, oh, this is just better. Similarly, people have grown up on tea bags and having very low quality powdered tea. They kind of don't know that if you steep it, you're supposed to be able to steep a tea multiple times. And so when you have the tea steeping multiple times, it has what I call progression. So it generally starts out lighter as it's getting wet and kind of opening up. And you'll have a little bit, oftentimes the fragrance kind of comes out towards the beginning and you'll have like a really nice fragrance, but not as much flavor. And then as it kind of opens up, you'll have a mixing of the fragrance and the flavor, and then a stronger flavor, and then it kind of like will like lose power over time as you use up all the tea energy. And people sometimes ask how many times you can steep it. It depends on how big your vessel was and how much water you were using. If you use a tiny bit of water in a big vessel, you really can't steep it multiple times. But if you use a lot of tea in a small pot, you might be able to make it 25 times. And so like for this, what we're doing here, we've been steeping, and I'd say we've done at least 8 steeps.
I think so, yeah.
Around there. Like I could keep going with this to 15 if I wanted to, but I'd say 3 to 8, we're getting the best out of it. And if I have a bunch of people here and we want to try multiple teas, at this point I'd be ready to, you know, toss the leaves and kind of go with it. But if you're at home, you could keep drinking for longer if you wanted to. So a lot of this is, it really is not so much science about like the second steep is best. It depends on the size of your vessel and all these sort of things. But I think that generally thinking about the stuff is good when you make the tea at home, because you may discover the tea you have in your cabinet responds really well in the second, third, and fourth steeps, and then it kind of dies, which is fine. But now you know that, and you're kind of ready and you're mindful for that. And when you're hosting, you'll be ready for that. And then part of the skill of hosting is like, if I have a tea, like right now, for instance, if I was just like having you guys over for tea, I know this tea is going to start losing it around now. And maybe instead of letting it go there, maybe I want to switch now. So everybody they're like, wow, that was great. And then the next one, wow, that was great, you know, and it continues to be that way. Alternatively, I have also met people that what they do with the first steep, instead of washing it out, they will keep the first steep on the side, drink the whole tea, and then when you kind of come down again, this tea comparatively is more powerful. So the first steep will have a lot of the original tea energy in it, even if it's a little bit lighter, and it's going to be lighter compared to the darker steeps that are coming, but it may be stronger than the last steeps at the end. And so that can, like in that sense, is the first steep not the best? Maybe the first steep is the best because it's being compared to the steeps at the end. So yeah, great question. Awesome. We'll do one last question up here, and then we'll turn off the thing. We'll switch teams, and we'll just kind of chat. Do you have the mic?
Yes, I do.
Great.
It's another compliment.
Oh, I like that.
I'm Chinese, and thank you so much for explaining. Because I think I was just feeling like you really managed to explain a lot of things
Awesome.
that I couldn't
Very cool.
say
Awesome.
in a simplest way, right?
Oh, that's great. Nali.
Sudo.
Suzhou. Yeah. They're from Suzhou. Suzhou is beautiful. Really beautiful. Yeah, very cool. So yeah, well, that's great. I mean, so what, I'll ask you then, what has, if I did it right, what are the people that are doing it wrong looking like? When you live, you live here, you're far from home, what just makes you go crazy when people talk about China?
I think people come with very technical questions, which you were trying to explain. There's a lot culturally goes with the tea, rather than just technically. At least people from home, when we talk about it, what do you buy? There are some famous names, but in general, people care less actually about this technical term.
Yeah.
More the packaging.
Yeah.
People care a lot more
Big boxes like,
how
yeah.
beautiful the box looks than
Yeah.
what it is, because it is
It's a
small
gift.
cups that you drink with your
Yeah.
friends.
Make sure I put the mic up here, not just
You,
the chair.
the small cups you drink with your friends, so that you keep pouring in, so they feel bad or that they owe you something. It feels like
Yeah.
you're doing them such a favor,
Yeah,
and then you can then ask them for money afterwards.
yeah.
That's the culture aspect of it. I
Mm.
think a lot of time I feel like people don't really acknowledge that as much as
Yeah.
curious about that as much as about the
Yeah, I think recently it's been interesting. Like the culture is always the hardest part to share, because like the good thing about tea is that compared to comedy where I have to subtitle all the jokes and half of them are not going to work in another place, the tea is much easier to share with new people, so that's good about tea. The challenge is, though, the thing that really makes me care about tea and like made me get on a plane and head out to Europe to talk to people about tea is not like, oh, if you hit this time and this temperature, the tea will be good. And I just want people to know that. That's like kind of, I won't say irrelevant to me. Like I think that knowing those times and temperatures is good, but it's only good in the sense that the thing about making the tea is like being mindful. It's like one thing I learned about from Chinese culture is like, how do you be a good host? Like, when people come over, what do you do? When I was coming into here, I'm like, okay, I gotta host like 30-something people. I wasn't expecting this when I set out. What's the best way I can do that? How am I gonna spread out these pots in the right way and have all the water be there and make it so that I can do the best I can to host these people? And same with like what teas I pick and stuff like that. Like the idea of trying to be a good host is very important to Gongfu tea culture. And so part of that is like, to be a good host, you can't just be like, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Like, no one wants that. But at the same time, you also can't just say like, okay, sit down, I'm gonna make it for you. So there's this give and take about how to be a good host. And I think a lot of that balance is just kind of like a healthy outlook at life. And that's the sort of thing that I want to bring to people is like, yes, you can drink tea. Yeah, you should pay attention to the steep time and temperature in that it will help you make better tea. But like, if you have perfect tea and you're acting like a machine and then you're like, drink it, like, we're not really doing what we mean to do here. And I'm sure, as you know, in China, you have everything from really high-end tea houses where they'll have like beautiful people pouring you tea, like very subtly with every turn of the hand considered, and that's one type of good. And then also, as I said, a lot of times you go to tea mountains and they just throw water in a cup and they drink the tea with the leaves floating in it. And like, you ask them like, how long do you steep it? And they're like, I don't know, like how long does it need? And they just don't think about it at all. So, and both of those are real and both of those are authentic and both of those are real culture. And so when I share my way of looking at things, whether it's through the social media videos, whether it's through the types of teas I pick for the website, whether it's the pricing I choose, like I could get really expensive rock tea. I don't, because I'm like, I don't really, it's not my ethos of how to do tea to charge people $20 a session for tea, and like, even if it may be worth that to me, like, I don't, like, that's not how I would host, you know? And similar, I also like could get a lot cheaper tea. And I'm like, there's no point, because I have to drink this every day myself. Like, if I wouldn't host somebody with this tea, there's no way I'm going to sell it. And so it's a mix of all those things together. So,
How would you say the prices are compared to the different countries around the world?
The price of tea is interesting. Tea is a wacko market. It's a really, really crazy market for many reasons. It's a market where you can find tea at all sorts of prices. So, and it's no secret, like if you go on Amazon and you search tea, you can find tea. The challenge is actually in many cases that there's too much tea, and what is the right tea for you is a really hard thing to figure out. And so really, in many ways, what I'm trying to do with the website is do what my tea teachers in China did, which is like a lot of the people I learned tea from were small tea shop owners in the wholesale tea market in Beijing. You go to Maliandao, the tea market, it's like 3,000 shops. And you sit down you wander into random stores and you sit down and you start talking with people. And if you vibe, then, you know, you drink good tea, 2 hours goes by in a flash. Other people you don't connect with, they're not giving you good tea, they're not talking, it's not your style. Okay, fine, leave, go to another shop. So when and then the goal of this is to get what I call tea guys. So it's like, when I want pu'er, I call Yunqing, you know. When I want like tea from Yunnan, I call Sister Ai or Gui Gui. And I have my tea guys. And then really what the website essentially is like what my tea guys have at a price range I think is kind of reasonable for the Western market that I can bring over. And also now increasingly, which is I feel kind of bad about, but I think I just have to admit this is reality. It's like increasingly I can only work with people that are also willing to work on the paperwork to get it over. In the beginning, like when the company was very small, we would just send it in the mail. And a lot of places still now do that. And I don't ever want to like stop the tea scene from growing and like be like, oh, you're not doing your import paperwork right. Because I personally think a lot of the regulation isn't necessarily actually even keeping people safer. Some of it is just regulation. But there's definitely an aspect now that it's like if I find a good tea guy and they have a really good tea, but if they can't like actually do the papers right and they refuse to learn, so some people don't want to learn, they just want to sell and they're done. And then some people are actually like, I really want to help the Western tea scene. I understand this is what needs to be done. They might even hire additional help, like not even charging me to get the papers done. Like some people really care, and increasingly that's important as well. Because like it doesn't matter to you guys if it's stuck in the court forever, and I really hope it is. It's stuck in the court forever. But like me being a tea guy, that was my only goal when I started this, was like be a tea guy in the sense that share about the tea, help people pick stuff. And it's not even saying that the stuff on my site is the best tea in the world. It's saying like, as your tea guy, this is what I would recommend. If you want green teas, I have a couple of them. I don't have 20, I don't have one, I have a couple. And if you want white tea, I have a couple. And if you want an aged white tea, I have one or two. If you want a newer white tea, you know, it's coming, you know, blah, blah, blah. I try to have a little bit of balance of everything in the sense that if you were actually walking into a real tea house that I had, I would have all my tea guys there ready to help recommend stuff for you, and I'm kind of the conduit where all the stuff from China comes in, and then I can kind of share it outward again. So yeah, it's very cool. Awesome. So thank you so much for being part of the show as we're on the other hand. Unbelievable to me that this thing that started as me going crazy during COVID and making tea videos in my dad's kitchen because I couldn't get back. But anyway, thank you all so much. Have a good one. But anyway, thank you all so much. Have a good one, and goodbye. And goodbye. There we go.